There's a lot of detransitioners that are speaking out that are not able to puberty is not an assembly line that you could just push a button and restart. That is a increasingly disproven scientific theory right now. Chloe Cole is one of the most famous detransitioners who, she's in her 20s and she was sold a bill of goods, and when she was 16 she said, I think I'm a man, and she went on a very, very aggressive regimen of hormone blockers and puberty blockers, and she has huge regret, and hopefully one day she'll be able to have children again. But it gets back to a question of so I'm just making a point though that these ideas have consequences. It's more than just a silly question. Oh, what is a woman? That if you can't answer it, or at the very least say that you should allow minors to become adults before they make these decisions, then, and this is not a small thing, the quote unquote gender affirming care, we know that in California you have to be 18 years old to get a tattoo. And yet 14-year-olds can go to what we call a doctor and get a highly aggressive hormone replacement therapy treatment, sometimes without even notifying their parent. And all of these are ramifications of the inability to answer very simple biological questions.
I would be interested in seeing your exact study or citation for when it comes to puberty blockers, because I know a lot of people, or not a lot of people, there's a lot of people who end up on puberty blockers not because they're necessarily trans, but because they're going through puberty too early. And there are clear negative side effects and consequences of, let's say, a 10-year-old girl getting her period.
That's a separate. You're right.
But it's used on cis children. I think what you're talking about is precocious puberty.
But it's not used on perfectly healthy, physically able-bodied children, right? So there's a great book that I guess we have
Modest Hikima donated $200. Charlie, sorry you had to travel to California for the show. My boy did you dirty by putting you next to the demon, WTF?
I don't think you're a demon, by the way.
Props on the new Rick Rickson.
Okay, well, maybe you are a demon. May Christ be with
you are brain dead. Sad.
All right, Modest Hikima, good to see you in the chat.
I'll reference one book, and she's a non-political doctor. Her name is Dr. Miriam Grossman. It's a book called Lost in Transnation. She has treated, not just theorized. She's a clinician and a physician, not just someone who writes abstract medical journals. And she is one of the most outspoken people against what is called gender-affirming care, and she's treating hundreds of kids that are now damaged by this.
So I know detransitioners exist, but what do you say to the thousands of trans people that actually report happiness and being healthy after they receive gender-affirming care?
Don't doubt that in the short term, testosterone therapy from someone who has a fair amount of testosterone, it can make you feel confident. It can make you feel better in your skin. That is not a lasting effect, though.
But it is for some people.
Well, the suicide rate. I can't say that word. The self-harm rate after 8 to 10 years actually goes up. It nearly doubles, and we're still studying it. That's the other point. Is that I'm not going to throw around a lot of studies here. And they very well might be right. It might have helped them individually, but let me give you an example. If a medication is on the market and it harms 1 in 250,000 people, for example, Robitussin. You guys ever take Robitussin?
No.
No, it's a cough thing. It's they found that one of their lots of Robitussin last week might have been contaminated, and they did a massive recall, right? And it was just a whisper of it. Okay. The point that is in medicine, the first rule used to be first do no harm. And the fact
still is, right?
No, they've changed it.
The Hippocratic Oath?
They've changed it, yeah. They have.
Who's they?
The American Medical Association and a lot of the medical institutions. It's similar, but it's not the same.
They've been changed by woke ideology?
Well, you'd be surprised, actually. The medical industry's been taken over by a lot of radical forces.
All doctors are woke now?
Well, for example, when they were giving monoclonal antibodies in the city of New York, they were prioritizing people based on the color of their skin. Black individuals in New York got monoclonal antibodies above their white counterparts.
Was it based on the color of their skin, or maybe their background related to their socioeconomic status?
It was racial, but I don't want to get too deep into that rabbit hole. But the point that I'm just trying to make is that in medicine in particular, you must have a cautious approach, even if there were pluses and positives, which might very well be true. If there's even a 1%, a 2% adverse event, you pull the drug immediately, because you first do no harm. If there's something that is actively damaging a society, and it's now a certifiable fact that we see thousands of young kids are being told that they can transition, when in reality they have other underlying issues that we should address. Depression, trauma, anxiety, or they're on the autism spectrum disorder, and they get mislabeled on whether a TikTok video or some sort of other thing makes them feel as if they might have, a transgender issue, when they very well might have other issues that need to be addressed. 1 in 27 men young boys are autistic. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to
totally fine. I just had a quick question for you two, since you guys had pretty strong positions on this. Can men get pregnant Oh,
Grid
okay.
1
Hold on.
Motorsports donated $200. If we want to talk numbers, then honesty requires we first admit that gender dysphoria is a mental condition which should be treated first before any physical treatments are given. Accuracy matters.
All right, Grid 1 Motorsports.
They no longer
Appreciate
call it gender dysphoria, unfortunately. I just want to, I would actually make your argument for you. They call, they don't even call it a medical condition. They call it, I actually don't even know what it's actually called. Gender dysphoria used to be the clinical term, but
they've changed it since.
so yeah, that's right. But I can go deeper into that. The old way we used to treat this is called watchful waiting, where we believed that puberty was the solution, not the problem. And almost every single case, and Europe was actually the pioneer of this, is that when you allow puberty to play its course, these individuals, they might end up being lesbian or gay, but not transgender. And that's a completely different thing that doesn't require hormones or eventually antidepressants on top of it. I'm sorry, Pixie, you were going to say something. So.
Yeah, my question was, can men get pregnant?
Two things. I would say if you're a biological male, if we're going to define male through biology or whatever, then no. I do want to push back on some things that I heard earlier.
Well, before you do that, go ahead. Aaron, do you have a answer to the...
I would say yes, because anybody who has a uterus has the capacity to give birth. So, for example, a trans guy who gets pregnant, yes, would be a man who is pregnant. But if you're talking about a man who is assigned a man at birth and does not have a uterus, then no, he doesn't have the ability to get pregnant. You look at me like I'm crazy or what? Do you disagree?
But a lot of women.
So do you
can
want to
get
know why
pregnant.
young men are going away from the left? That's why young men are leaving the left.
Why? They wanna get
Why?
Because what you just said is...
Because they're uncomfortable acknowledging reality.
what you
That
just,
some trans men can
what-
get pregnant.
What
It's
you
like,
just said is at war with reality and, you know,
I
massacring...
mean, a lot of women can't get pregnant
basic
either.
vocabulary.
So that doesn't
Yeah,
define
exactly.
It's just a
men
question.
or
It's just a
women.
question, you know. I'll let you come in just a sec, Pixie. Which one of you referenced chromosomes? Is that, well, you said like, oh, you didn't check our chromosomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, people understood what a woman was before chromosomes were discovered. So the definition does not require this type of abstraction.
People understood what a woman was on the basis of the societal norms at the time, generally speaking, right?
Well, it's more
Which was my
precisely, it's about
answer,
like
yeah.
the gonads. If you were at any point in your life going to produce large gametes, then you're a woman.
How society, at least most societies as well, outside of like Western as well, but even Western, we can make this argument.
Okay.
What they would look at is the way that a person is like necessarily performing. So what is their role? That's why you have like the idea of like non-binary, third gender, et cetera, because there have been people also who have not performed their role as like a male or female. So they're put
Sure.
into the third category, third sex, whatever.
Okay.
So I would argue that for the vast majority of human histories and societies, what they look at is what is your performance. And that maps on to what we do now, because we don't really look at biology, we look at people act.
You
And
said-
that's why, let me finish.
Go ahead.
That's why we also, the terms less manly, he's less of a man than him, or she's not that womanly, makes sense. If gender was truly a binary, those words would make no sense. It would be like cat and not cat. That doesn't, you can't have a in between really. And the same thing applies for gender. There is a spectrum there. That's why the words less womanly, more manly, less manly make sense to us.
and all of those things are fluid throughout time. Like what constituted like masculine tendencies or behaviors will be different now than it was several years ago. Or even like things like colors. Like for example, pink used to be considered a masculine color. Pink is no longer really considered a masculine color. It's considered a feminine color. So there was never anything inherently masculine about the color blue or the color pink or anything like that. That could always change at any given point in time.
Do you think that male brains and female brains, or men and women brains, are different, wired differently?
There are differences between male and female brains, but I believe it's a matter of like statistical averages of like gray matter. There's not going to be like distinct anatomical features that differentiate a female brain from a male brain.
Really? You really think that?
Well, no, it's proven, like scientifically.
Well,
like
no,
when we
it's
take,
not.
yes, it
No.
is. When we take a brain scan of a male and female, the average doctor can't look and be like, that is a male brain right there.
Not true.
Now,
No, hold on.
Wait,
if
let me
you do a
finish my
SPECT
sentence, please.
scan, okay, if you do a SPECT scan, you can see what parts of the brain light up. And in a woman, the basal ganglia and the amygdala is far more active, which is the inner thought matrix. Women have a far busier inner thought life than men do. Would you guys agree with
I
that?
agree.
Right,
I was
but-
going to say it's very
So that's not true.
it's very
Wait,
well known that like men generally are more on the logical side of things, and women are more on the emotional side of things. And I think that has a big role, or the way that our brains are wired has a big role to play. I'm not saying that if you took babies who were completely unmolded that, you know, their brains would look different, but I think as we age, living in the gender that we are given, you know, our brains become attuned to certain things, and that's why parts of our
Yeah,
brain
like
light up.
piggybacking off of that
Yeah.
point, I don't doubt that the studies that you looked at did find differences in like brain mapping scans between men and women, but the key thing is that they looked at men and women. So that's already a brain that's been subjected to a lifetime, or not a lifetime, but like decades long
So do you-
socialization.
let-
So
I- I
that
just wanna
socialization is
make
going
sure-
to impact it. If you looked
Sorry, I don't mean
at
to
like a
interrupt,
brain
yeah.
scan of like infants, for example, like a male infant and a female infant, it would be like how different would it really
So-
look? Do you think it would look significantly different?
No, it's not even close. Of course, it's different, and I can prove it to you in two ways. But the first one, do you guys know the John Money gender experiment?
No.
So okay, I'll just really quick. John Money, who is a total creep, he believed that this is before we mapped the human genome. Okay, this is before we even knew about chromosomes. He said that men and women are blank slates at birth, and he said that they're formed through the toys we give them, the colors we appropriate to them, and they're blank slates. There was these identical twins. One of the twins burns themselves terribly in the genitals, and he said raise that twin as a girl. And basically his entire life he was tortured, and awful story, eventually rebelled against John Money. And this twin eventually was told that, hey, you were born a boy but raised as a girl, and even had a vagina put onto you artificially. And he was like, instead of being mad, he was relieved, because he said, I knew I was a boy all along. So there's no clinical evidence to support that. Secondly, though, it's a funnier one, okay? Do you hear me out? And I think this will resonate with all of you. Harvard University locked a group of men in a room alone, 100 of them, and a group of women in a room alone, okay? And